Systems of Notation from Circles to Rectangle by Doris Green. In the early 70s, I was the holder of a secret that would soon explode, causing havoc among the people who had appointed themselves as overseers of African music. It was a project that I began when I was in high school, studying Pitman stenography. Using the symbols and principles of Pitman stenography, I was able to create a system for writing African music, the sounds African instruments made when played. I began with the sounds a drum makes when played. Communicating with Africans from Brooklyn was extremely difficult and time-consuming. The only source I could find that had information on the music of Africa was the International Library of African Music, located in Rue du Port, Transvaal, South Africa. In that time, there were no computers, and telephone calls to Africa was out of the question price-wise. The International Library produced journals on African music written by soi-disant experts in the field. I was able to obtain a list of people in the field of African music. There were a few Africans on the list, but the majority were people whose background in music was Western, not African. Let's flash back to my high school days. When I wrote my first drum cymbals, those sounds were called doo-doo-dum-chak. These tones are basically known as bass tone and slap to drum students. During the 50s, there was a popular selection of African drumming called patakato, which was the rave. It was played in a stick-in-hand fashion. It was simple selection in common time, with few changes in the rhythm. All musical systems must have a staff wherein the timing of the cymbals placed thereon can be timed. Patakato was played with a stick in hand. The stick was used to strike the center of the drumhead, followed by the hand striking the drumhead. Then the stick struck the wooden frame of the drum followed. I put these cymbals in a circle. The complete action of the rhythm used 4 circles. I drew a rectangle around these circles, so I had 4 circles within the rectangle. I placed a circle in each corner of the rectangle, starting in the upper left corner, then going to the upper right corner, to the lower right corner, and finally to the lower left corner. By the time the player reached the upper left-hand corner of the rectangle, the player had finished 1 measure of the music. The box method of a staff worked well for patakato, but not for selections that were not in common time. Writing music for African drums was only part of the solution. What about the corresponding dance movements? In Africa, there is no dance without some form of music. Communication with Africans on the continent was still a slow process, but fortunately for me, news of my system had leaked out, and I received my first invitation from the master of Yoruba drumming, the late Timmy of Ede, Oba Adetoyese Laoye I. He wanted me to come to Nigeria to apply my system of notation to the Yoruba Igben drums. The Timmy of Ede was the principal drummer specializing in all drums, but particularly the Yailu Dundun talking drums of the Yoruba people. In order to honor the Timmy of Ede's request, I applied for the Fulbright Hayes grant and was accepted. Unfortunately, Nigeria had a coup d'etat and my grant was rescinded. It is difficult to chronicle the story of the creation of systems of notation without using flashbacks. When I created my first drum sounds, I knew that it was only half of the task that was before me. I definitely needed a way to write the dance movements for the accompanying music. My girlfriend, who was also a dancer, told me that Brooklyn College was offering, for the first time, in the fall of 1962, Labanotation, the system for writing dance movements. Overnight, I became an undergraduate student in Brooklyn College, pursuing how to write dance movements. Reading the Labanotation textbook, I saw the section with the heading Breakdown of a Count Beat, Hutchinson, 1954. I recognized the musicality of it instantly. This was a way that I could represent the rhythm more accurately. All I had to do was convert my circles into rectangles, and I could fuse African music to African dance, resulting in a single integrated score. As the winner of 3 CUNY, City University of New York Faculty Research Awards, I was able to go to Africa to conduct research in various places in Africa. My trip began in East Africa with the cultural informant Washawana Mashallah, who was the cultural representative for the eastern coast of Tanzania. I studied several dances that were popular in the eastern region of Tanzania. It was obvious that what I was seeking was found in greater numbers in West Africa, not East Africa. The music of East Africa was largely melodic rather than percussive in nature. I also crossed the continent from Tanzania to Senegal, concentrating on specific countries that were recommended to me. Naturally, it was easier to conduct research in English countries of West Africa. But bear in mind, there are only 5 countries in West Africa that speak English. They are Nigeria, Ghana, Liberia, Sierra Leone, and the Gambia. I would leave the continent of Africa from the shores of Senegal, the last country on the continent, before flying across the Atlantic Ocean back to the States. My cultural informant in Senegal was Maurice Senghor, creator of the National Ballet of Senegal, and nephew of Senegal's first president, Leopold Sédar Senghor. I explained to him that I was conducting research in African music and dance and wanted to talk to him about my musical notation system from African drums. He promised to give me whatever assistance I needed for my research. He announced that his company was coming to New York in October 1971 to appear in the Afro-Asian Festival held at the Brooklyn Academy of Music. There were several groups that appeared in the Afro-Asian Festival, but it was the National Dance Company of Senegal that reigned supreme. Their appearance shocked the world and changed the way African dance was perceived, studied, and performed forever. As I had his attention, I decided to reveal to him that I could write African music for drums and other instruments as well. He told me that African music was too complex, and he feared that he would not be able to comprehend it. I begged him to give me 1/2 hour of his time so I could demonstrate it to him. He agreed, and I prepared a French copy for him. I demonstrated the symbols for the drums. Mr. Senghor practiced the symbols that were written on the paper. Within 15 minutes, he, who once thought that the system was so complex, was very simple. He forwarded the notes to Abdurrahman Diop, musical director of Senegal, as well as being on the advisory board for UNESCO, International Music Council of UNESCO. Mr. Diop explained that my work was indeed what the continent had been seeking for centuries. The word was out, and it caused havoc, eruptions of seismic proportions throughout those who held high positions in the world of African music and dance and in the field of ethnomusicology. From circles to rectangle, the playing surface of most drums are circles, be they single-headed drums or multiple-headed drums. There are a few square-faced drums that are played by the Ga people of Ghana. After viewing the Takato, the breakdown of a beat and lab notation textbook, I converted my circles to rectangles, which not only gave me a better way to establish the rhythm of the selection, but also provided the means to fuse my music notation, Greenotation, to lab notation, creating a single integrated score. Who tells the story of African dance? Africans have been passing their cultural knowledge between generations as a mouth-to-ear process since the beginning of time. The main drawback to the transfer of culture through this process is that any society that is totally dependent upon transferring their culture between generations by oral transmission is doomed to failure because of the failure of the human memory over time and outside interpretation. Outside interpretation is more detrimental than the loss of memory. The culture under the influence of outside interpretation tells the culture through the Western perspective rather than from the African perspective. To begin with, Ghana was the first country to gain independence from their colonizers. From that time, Ghana took a leadership role as ambassador of Ghanaian culture. In 1962, it was Professor Albert Marere Opoko who took African dance from the bush and introduced it in the classroom setting in the University of Ghana at Legon. He also created the Ghana National Dance Ensemble, which would tour countries exposing them to the various cultures of Ghana. Professor Opoku brought notator Odette Bloom to Legon to teach lab notation to the dance students to preserve Ghanaian dance from adulteration. Before we delve into the African perspective versus the Western perspective, we need to examine how Africans define dance and music. Let us begin with the word dance. The word dance does not exist in African languages. The concept of movement to music being called dance was given to the Africans, through the language of the colonizers. Therefore, the words dance, danse, and ballet come from the English and French languages. Consequently, the word music that defines sounds an instrument makes when played, namely the term music, musique, and musiki, emanate from the English, French, and German languages. How is African dance defined? For a definition of African dance, we need to look at the works and performances and writings of the elders such as Akin Yuba, Kedefateba, Maurice Anasengo, Yangurambua, Professor J.H.K. Nkishia, Professor Albert Mare Opoku, the Timi of Ede, Oba Adetoyese Laoye I, and Duro Ladipo, to name a few of the distinguished elders who played a prominent role in the transmission of African music and dance. It was Akin Yuba who classified the kinds of music found on the continent of Africa. His first category was traditional music, which is the oldest form of music found throughout the continent of Africa. Traditional music is related to the language of the people, which is tonal. This music is played on traditional instruments such as drums, bells, rattles, xylophones, and a host of naturally sonorous instruments. The music is governed by the language of the people, and it is not understood by those who are not part of the neighborhood. Colonialism placed a damper on the traditional music, which interrupted the transmission of the traditions between generations. Mr. C.K. Lasipo, one of my cultural informants from Ghana, revealed to me that he did not know as much about the culture as his father and grandfather knew. I found the works of C.K. Lasipo to be well documented, particularly the courses he taught in California. The restrictions imposed by colonialism created gaps in the seamless transmission of culture between generations. It is in all probability these gaps in the transmission of culture cause reduction in the drum language, reducing the drum language to onomatopoeia, the vocal imitation of the spoken word. The second category of African music is neo-traditional. This is traditional music that has been dislodged from its place of origin and often uses non-traditional instruments such as set drums, keyboards, and guitars. There are basically 5 categories of music found on the continent of Africa. With the exception of traditional and neo-traditional music, the other categories that use the word Western, Westernized, or classic to define the music therein are merely European forms of music that have been imported into Africa. Naturally, African dance parallels the same classification with one addition, namely subject matter, theme, or event. It took years of collaborating with various elders before defining African dance in acceptable terms. Therefore, African dance, excluding religion and rituals, parallel the classifications of music, except the aspect that something must occur that the Africans choose to remember. This is often called an event, theme, or happening, which occurs. Otherwise, there is no subject matter to dance about. A classic example of an event that later became a dance occurred when a marching band was preparing to parade in Ghana. All of a sudden, they heard a sound, a large sound, and they looked up and they saw an airplane flying over their heads. They shouted, "Gaun," meaning air vessel or airplane. This was the first time an airplane had flown over Ghana. Therefore, the people created movement and set it to the rhythm of the group. This dance became so popular that it was danced throughout Africa. Even today, in the region where they all began, you'll often see them carrying a flag with a picture of an airplane on it. Often the sound of a horn can also be heard during renditions of Gahun in the original community. How can we respectively embrace and appreciate non-Western dance styles and dance history in our classroom? This is a serious question that must be approached gingerly. Obviously, the first factor would be to recognize African dance music as a discipline on its own. It should not be grouped under world studies, anthropology, or sociology. The most important factor is to listen to the African teacher and do not try to superimpose your views and interpretation over those of the Africans. I brought a personality from Ghana to teach in NYU, New York University. The first thing he told the students was before they learned the dance, they had to learn to play their instruments. In Africa, there is no dance without some form of music. Another point to consider is that African dance is tied to the spoken language of the people. To be specific, a dancer cannot be cued through the dance, only through the music. Therefore, the dancer must be familiar with the drum language. A simple movement, such as to make a turn, the dancer must be familiar with the tone the drum emits. These tones vary from language to language. When I was a United States cultural specialist assigned to teach students at the University of Ghana at Legon how to write music and dance on the computer, I chose the dance tokwe. In this dance, the tones were to, de, ji, de, to. When the dancer hears these tones, she will make a turn. This turn takes 3 measures to execute. Each turn introduces a different movement until the dancer is directed to leave the stage. To summarize several points, you must learn the music before you can dance. Secondly, you need to approach your studies from the African perspective, not the Western perspective. When researching dance in the field, you should have a cultural informant to plan your research project. New approaches to teaching African music and dance during these times. Throughout the years, internal strife, poverty, in-house bickering, and now COVID have caused African music and dance to drift into the doldrums. These conditions have caused people to search for new ways to teach dance music. Many are teaching various programs offered on the Internet. There is a program called Finale, which represents musical scores, but that can be reproduced from a print source. The drawback to this program, Finale is designed for Western instruments, and it takes the music note, and it's not for percussion instruments. Over the course of more than 50 years conducting research in African dance, I have experienced a number of notation systems and attempts to notate African dance. Not all attempts to notate African dance were created by Westerners. There were a few Africans who tried to notate African dance and music. The limitation of these attempts were they were designed only for their particular ethnic group or language and could not be comprehended outside that group or language. Secondly, the attempts, whether created by Africans or Westerns, could not represent both music and dance as a single integrated score. Only Greenotation system, fused with labanotation, could present African music and dance in a single integrated score, preserved and reproduced from a print source. Greenotation with labanotation provides perpetual sustainability to African music and dance. Now I'm open to questions.